You come to this program because you want to know principled truth. You come to this program because you know I am not influenced by any third party in what I think and what I believe. And so we're going to take a look at this so-called ceasefire deal and draw our own conclusions without all the press releases, all the patting on the back. It's not even completed as far as Israel's concerned through their process. All the misleading media and so forth and so on. I start with a few premises. I trust President Trump. That doesn't mean we'll always agree, but I trust President Trump. And when he texted me after he won the Republican primary, unsolicited by me, he said, I want you to know, Mark, quote, I will protect Israel. I trust Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been the greatest prime minister in the history of Israel and has done more to protect that country than one can imagine, from foreign enemies and domestic enemies and the Biden administration. They're not the only parties involved in this. I do not trust Hamas, a terrorist organization. I despise it. I do not trust Qatar, a terrorist organization dressed up as a country that has given aid and comfort, billions of dollars to Hamas, that gave safe haven to Hamas leaders, and now is one of the leading mediators in this so-called ceasefire peace deal. And what is a peace deal? What is a piece of paper to a terrorist organization? It's nothing. I do not trust Biden and Blinken under any circumstances in any deal, because they've sold out our country to the communist Chinese, they've sold out Israel to Iran, and they've created horrendous inhumanity throughout the world, and they have blood on their hands. Blood on their hands. I find it interesting that even some of my friends are saying that under this deal, hundreds of Palestinian prisoners will be released. No, 3,000 will be released, not hundreds. It's right there in print. 3,000 terrorists, including convicted murderers. Would we do that? You don't know my conclusion yet. I'm taking you through the steps of my thinking. Would we release 3,000 terrorists for any reason? When we released, or should I say the Biden regime released, was it 3 Al-Qaeda terrorist leaders from Guantanamo Bay secretly without consulting Congress? Were we not furious? How about 3,000? Seems a little bit on the high side, don't you think? The hostages. They've been through holy hell. Those that have survived. And we want them out too. The IDF soldiers, almost 1,000 of them, have died. It's an enormous number for a tiny country. They have died for the purpose of defeating Hamas, for the purpose of ridding Hamas from the Gaza Strip, for the purpose of protecting Israel. From today forward, young men and women have put their lives on the line. From the streets of Israel, in every walk of life, they have died. Did they die for this? Or did they die to destroy Hamas? Serious questions, don't you think? And right out of the box, Biden talks about this sets the foundation for a Palestinian state. And I do fear that there are people whispering President Trump's ears who promote the same thing. A Palestinian state. I know their names, but I will save that for another day. But I have to believe President Trump himself knows better. He's given no indication that he does support such a thing. That is a red line. That is a red line. I've gone through this deal, which is not in writing, which is not finalized to the extent it's available in the Jerusalem Post. So let's go through it together. According to reports, the agreement will include supervision by Qatar, a terrorist nation, and Egypt of the return of refugees from the southern Gaza Strip to the north, and simultaneously the withdrawal of the IDF from the Nazirem corridor will be completed in stages. Hamas demanded that the mediators determine the time frame in which the IDF will withdraw. Using a timetable, Joe Biden said that the foundations of the deal have been proposed as early as June 2024. So there's phases. Phase 1. The first phase of the deal will last 42 days, and implementation of the agreement will begin 2 or 3 days after its signing. When a terrorist organization signs a piece of paper, ladies and gentlemen, do they feel an obligation to comply with it? The IDF will withdraw from the Nazirem corridor in all populated areas of the enclave to about 700 meters from the border, except in 5 specified areas where will be 400 meters. The IDF will reportedly reduce its presence in the Philadelphia I corridor. This is key. That's the corridor through which Hamas has been armed. And then withdraw from it completely over the course of the first 50 days. I was told that wasn't going to happen. But yet this is written here. Israel agreed to open the Rafah border crossing a week after the agreement is implemented, and the agreement will include a protocol regarding humanitarian aid during the first phase under the supervision of the mediators. Israel is expected to begin preparations to begin the movement of aid through the crossing immediately. Look at all the obligations Israel has here. Israel will open the crossing to civilians after the release of all the women, both civilians and soldiers, from Hamas's captivity. God help us on what they're going to tell us what's been done to them. All wounded and 6 Palestinian civilians will be allowed to leave through Rafah crossing following its reopening to civilians. Hamas will be permitted to transfer 50 wounded operatives. I don't know what that is. Are those terrorists? To Egyptian hospitals each day. However, each operative is subject to approval by both Israel and Egypt. The crossing will remain jointly operated by Israel and Egypt. Israel will begin allowing unarmed refugees to return to the north of Gaza Strip on foot, subject to searches in the first week. Following the first week, unarmed refugees on foot will be permitted to return to the north without search via the coastal Al-Rashid Street. 2 weeks later, they'll be permitted to return via the central Salah ad-Din Road. Following the first week, refugees will be permitted to return to the north via vehicles, which will be inspected by a private company to be determined by the mediators in coordination with Israel. The fact that Qatar is a mediator makes me sick to my stomach. They funded the attack on October 7th. They're the major funding source for Hamas. And they protected the Hamas leadership in Qatar. I don't know this guy. What's his name? Whitliff? Witkoff. I'm sorry, Witkoff. I don't know this guy from a hole in the ground. He's apparently very close to President Trump. I don't like him. He's done business with Qatar. There he is, praising Qatar. You don't praise a terrorist organization that's been funding anti-Semitism in our colleges and universities. Praise them for what? Oh, they've been very good, hard at work. Even if they are, you don't praise them. You don't praise the arsonist for putting out the fire. So I don't know what the hell that's all about. But that's Witkoff. Again, I don't know him. Doesn't matter to me. The Prime Minister of Qatar confirmed that 33 hostages will be released. Wow, where's the others? The women and children first, followed by the female soldiers, then men over the age of 50 and young men who are defined as humanitarian cases. You know what that means? Yeah, we'll give you the young men for a humanitarian gesture. In exchange, Israel will release about 2,000 convicted terrorists. So why do my colleagues at Fox and elsewhere keep talking about hundreds? Thousands. 2,000 convicted terrorists, including about 250 who were sentenced to life imprisonment. In addition, Israel will release about 1,000 terrorists captured after October 7th. That's 3,000, not hundreds, 3,000 terrorists. Something we would never even consider. Just saying. Stick with me. I'll get to the end of this. 9 sick or injured hostages are to be released in exchange for the release of 110 convicted terrorists serving life sentences. They're murderers. Another article said they're actually convicted murderers. But Israel will release them in exchange for 9 sick or injured hostages. Now, in addition to those 3,000, Israel will release another 1,000 from Gaza, all of whom were arrested after October 8th, and none were directly involved on October 7th. No terrorists involved on October 7th will be released in the deal, as previously reported by the Jerusalem Post. Elderly hostages over the age of 50 are being released at a ratio of 27 life sentence prisoners and 31 other prisoners per elderly hostage. You understand? So it's one Israeli life is worth the life of 27 life sentence prisoners and 31 other prisoners. So basically, they're going to be releasing 58 prisoners in exchange for every Israeli who's released over the age of 50. The mediators promised to issue a UN Security Council resolution supporting the declaration of a ceasefire to ensure the parties comply with the agreement. Right. Israel wanted to supervise the Philadelphia corridor. That corridor is key. And Israel lost a lot of men and women fighting to get it. That's where all the arms flow through. This request was rejected. According to foreign media reports, Israel was convinced of the need to withdraw from the area. They had to be convinced, I guess, by this guy, Witkoff. The reports of a withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor are a complete lie, however, said the Prime Minister. And it's my understanding that there will be partial Israeli forces in that corridor. And it goes on. Now you know more than anybody else on TV's reporting. The Emir of Qatar announced this so-called final hostage deal. And an influencer in Israel, Rachel Ger, she writes, if there is a clear victor of the Hamas-Israel war, it's Qatar. They nurtured Hamas, creating the horrors of October 7, and then leveraged negotiations over stolen children for political influence and financial gain. And God knows they got both out of this deal. More. Aviva Klumpus. Netanyahu's office said the prime minister will address the public after the deal is sealed and complete, quote unquote. Here's what you're not hearing. There are some technical hoops to be jumped through. The deal must pass through the security cabinet and full government cabinet. Now, their cabinet's not like ours. It's a mixture of parties. It's a coalescing of parties. And so if you have parties objecting, it could be a problem for Netanyahu. In fact, it could bring down his entire government. He's got everything on the line. The government must also allow time for opponents of the agreement to actually petition the Supreme Court. But I don't think that'll be a problem since the court's radical left. So you have this review process and possible challenges. Those aren't over, despite the misreporting of the media. Basically, what the media are reporting are their own opinions, which is constant. So where does this leave us? As patriotic Americans who support the state of Israel, where does this leave us?